Teddy Atlas made a comparison. He was talking about Sugar Sean O'Malley. You want to know who he compared him to? Israel Adesanya. I had not thought of that. Nobody has ever made that comparison for me. As soon as Teddy said it, boom, I get it and I see it. Our sport, by the way, is in an era that it has never been in before. One thing that we learned in 1993 when we were trying to figure out what the greatest art was is that it wasn't even competitive grappling. Wasn't even a competitive maybe. The most dominant art in the world that the world had ever seen is grappling. Now, you could start to have a discussion over which form, but in 1993 until roughly now, it's been grappling. I thought all about what Teddy said. Let's start at the top. Now, I'm going to bring Francis into this because Francis left as champion who wasn't beaten. Oh, by the way, when Francis stopped, even if you want to run it back one, that was surreal gone. But these were both strikers. Neither one has ever had a wrestling match. Neither one has a singlet in their closet. And that's very unheard of in the UFC. It has happened before, but it's very unheard of. A guy that's never had a wrestling match. All right, so we got two. We got Francis, or you can take Francis away because he retired and go to surreal. I mean, really interesting. You bring it down one. Where would you put Prohaska? I don't know of a wrestling match that Prohaska's had. I do know he comes from a part of the world that's pretty strong in wrestling. But I don't know of a match that he's had. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of Prohaska being invited to Abu Dhabi. I've never heard about him entering a trials or wanting to go to Abu Dhabi. I don't know anything about his grappling background. I admit he's very skilled at grappling. I'm just sharing for you. Do you put him into the striker category? And you most certainly would put Jamal there. Of course you would. He was a college basketball player. That's the opposite of wrestling. It's like the cops and the firemen. They just can't get along, right? The basketball players and the wrestlers, they can't get along. It's two meaningful sports, but they go at the same time. You have to choose one, so they just end up not liking each other. I'm just sharing for you. For sure, you got to put him into the striker category. Not to mention, you go down a weight class, Israel Adesanya, Alex Pierre, right? I mean, they're banging this back and forth. Neither one has ever had a wrestling match. It's really interesting time in our sport. You bring it down one to 170 pounds. You got Leon Edwards. He comes from Britain that doesn't even contest wrestling. I mean, see where I'm going with this? Now, all of a sudden, you have Sugar Sean O'Malley, who's also the champion. And Sean does have a grappling background, but we can all agree that that's a striker. We can all agree about that power, about that precision, about that length. We can all agree about his anti-wrestling and how much he likes to keep it on the feet. He does have a competitive grappling background, but he would go to the category of striker. I like the comparison by Teddy Atlas, and this is a time that strikers have earned. They've worked for this. They never conceded. They never conceded from 1993. They stayed after. They stayed after the crowd. What's the weakness? What's the problem? Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to fix it. And now they've taken over the sport. Or so it would seem. I mean, I got to tell you, when I do look at the heavyweight division, I got to pay the respect to Francis, and I got to acknowledge what Surreal had done. But as I look at the heavyweight division, it is the first time in history we don't have an All-American wrestler anywhere in the division, not at the top, not in the top 10 or within the rankings. He's not even signed. We haven't had an All-American wrestler signed to the heavyweight division in 3 years. Are you aware of that? Are you aware of that? The night Daniel Cormier walked away is the last time an All-American's even been in the division. But I got to bring that to you because the strikers get to take their victory lap. Without question, they do. How do you have a wrestler be on top when you're not even signing? I mean, what is that about? Is that purely coincidence? Does that have nothing to do with anything? Most likely. I mean, are those guys at that weight class just not going and raising their hand and doing that? Most likely. I'm just pointing out that it's not there. We had this with Abu Dhabi a couple of Abu Dhabis ago. good friend of mine, but he put out a piece saying that jiu-jitsu, after Abu Dhabi, jiu-jitsu has clearly shown that it is the greatest. You didn't let any wrestlers into the event. Like the days where Mark Kerr would come in with a purple belt and smash all of your guys, you didn't let any wrestlers into the event. So sure, jiu-jitsu is number one. You only let jiu-jitsu guys into the event. It's an interesting time, man. How are they doing it? How are they getting it done? How is striking now been so effective? And even at 205 pounds, like I don't think that's going to go anytime soon. It looks like it's going to be Pereira versus Prohaska. I mean, it looks like we're going to keep these strikers. It's going to be heavy. It's an interesting time, right? If you were to get your kid into martial arts, or if you're a young man, you're 13, 14-year-old, and this is your big dream and you're seeing it on TV, it used to be that you would go and find your local grappling school. You would go and join your local high school wrestling team. But if you're watching the sport now and you're watching guys like O'Malley, who are getting comparisons by the great Teddy Atlas, one of the greatest striking minds to ever live, he's making that comparison to Israel Adesanya, who's the reigning champion of the world. I mean, this is interesting stuff. It's a different time. The baton is being passed. For how long? I don't think any of us saw this coming, though. I don't think any of us saw a time when striking was going to take over in mixed martial arts. It looked as though that debate was settled in 1993, but it's back right now in 2023.